Let's say you had friends for dinner. You cooked a very good lasagna. You took it out of the oven, served it on your fancy new plates, and sat down. Everyone started talking, you caught up on everyone's life. The room was full of laughs and stories. You then look over to the door and ask yourself, did I leave the oven on? And then you start thinking, what if the gas started leaking? You remember turning it off, so you try to focus on your best friend retelling for the 10th time the story of her trip to Italy. But this singular thought re-emerges again. Did I leave the oven on? You then imagine the kitchen going up in flames and everyone running asphyxiated, trying to escape the mess you caused. You start to get anxious, your hands are sweaty, your heart starts pounding, you can't stand still. You need to check the oven again. So you get up, run for the door. This is the 5th time you have checked the oven this evening. Hi, my name is Sasha Malot. The oven wasn't on. Studies show that every single person will experience a similar situation in their lifetime. However, 1 out of 2 people will later develop a mental health disorder. This means that at least half of you will have to deal with this kind of situation. And it is okay. We as humans are conditioned to feel, think, and experience deeply. This is what makes up life and what makes human existence so particular and its meaning so coveted. But when do these experiences of stress and anxiety reach the status of disorder? The episode that I opened with was made specifically relatable to everyone, whether they be students who project themselves in their adult years or adults who typically hold events like these. It is composed of 2 main elements, the obsession and the compulsion. The obsession is simply the persistent idea coming back over and over again. In this case, did I leave the oven on? The compulsion is the urge to get up. By definition, it is an alarm caused by an unsafe situation as a means to protect. If one were to find themselves in this said unsafe situation, the immediate rush of stress and impulse to act are what compose the compulsion. It is a translation of the trigger that has been activated in your brain. So basically, the compulsion is the reaction to the obsession. When do they become considered a mental health disorder? Compulsions are often a sign of mental distress. However, it is important to understand that they only become considered a disorder when they become paralyzing, when living comfortably becomes impossible, and when your mental space is overjammed as a result. You may then need to consider professional help. This brings me to why the subject is close to my heart. When I was younger, I was a very stressed kid. My parents noticed this feature very early, and at the age of 9, I was diagnosed with a form of anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, most commonly known as OCD, characterized by repetitive episodes and high levels of anxiety. I still remember the day I was sat down in my living room and asked how many times a day I had to count to 50 while holding my breath, or else a loved one would die. I always thought of myself as a very lucky girl. I was funny, cute, I had great friends, good grades. I basically had it all for a 12-year-old girl. And in my mind, I viewed this aspect of myself as God's way to balance out all the good I had inherited. Makes sense. Other than retaining that I was different from all the other kids, I understood nothing about what was happening to me until it caught up on me and I was forced to deal with it. It was during the summer of between 7th and 8th grade. My father entered my room to turn on the air conditioning, and he set it to 19 degrees Celsius. And I told him, no, set it to 18. It has to be even. And he looked at me, smiled, tilted his head, and we both knew that it was going to be a trip. Nothing beats the isolation you feel when your mind is clustered with these scary thoughts. For a long time, I felt very alone, distanced myself from probably everyone I knew, and it is maybe the worst mistake of my life because everything rapidly came crashing down and I quickly lost the will to continue. But when your mind stops working, the world around you doesn't. And so I fought. And one day, it was like a trigger had been activated in my brain. And the first intrusive thought that came to my mind was quickly dismissed by the logic beating the feelings because I looked at myself and I realized that I was ridiculous. I knew exactly the origin of my thoughts, so why would I let it distress me? And I could proudly say now that I never had to interrupt the story of a trip to Italy ever again. This brings me to why I decided to bring up the topic. After overcoming this, looking around the people in my life, I have noticed that the lack of understanding on the subject has caused a serious problem. A problem I like to call the paradox of information. When people experience the kind of situation that I talked about earlier, they get anxious. They want to know what is happening to them. And so their first reflex is to use the first available source, the internet. But what the internet actually does is that it pushes you in so many directions. And so the more you find out about things, the more you realize you actually know nothing. And so you get anxious, confused, and your perception of reality completely becomes distorted. The interesting angle I decided to analyze with this paradox is how it affects teenagers in the realm of mental health. We all know that the main endeavor of teenagers is the process of self-discovery. You add this up with the uncertainty caused by the huge amount of information they just found. They will form a sort of mental cluster, a mental box, where they will pick and choose any information they understand or associate with in the slightest and completely identify themselves to it, which will then affect the process of self-discovery because they will feel as if they have it already figured out and, on the long run, the constitution of their future personality. My main objective with this talk is to show you that we as humans cannot be completely understood. And because mental health is a derivative of human life, it does not have a linear explanation that can be found on the internet or explained by a professional. And to the people who deal with this kind of situation, just know that it is normal to want to acquire information, but do so smartly. Use credible sources, keep my talk in the back of your mind, and talk to professionals because they might not know everything, but they are the people who know best because they dig from their own experiences and that of others. And know that the continuous fight we all deal with in mental health only makes us stronger. Thank you.